Hello, welcome to Smiley's. This is another one of those impromptu, I was bored, figured I'd just do it episodes of After Hours. This one is more so dedicated towards unreliable narration as a whole, and how that impacts narrative, because it's something I wanted to tackle in the last episode, but I couldn't. So, yeah. For what it's worth, I'm actually going to declare spoilers this time. I will be mentioning, at least tangentially, the Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe, obviously. Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson, and at least some tangential references to the Kharkanas trilogy, also by Steven Erikson. And also, I will be making mention of Kushiel's Dart, and as a whole, Kushiel's Legacy by Gallan. Of those, I have not read the Book of the New Sun. I have read Kushiel's Dart, which I will be making references to. So if you have not read those, goodbye. I don't know how you find yourself here if you haven't read Malazan, to be honest. But in any case, I would like to start off by attributing a few quotes of unreliable narration as a whole. And then, I'm not going to be doing literary analysis, but more so, I want to talk as a whole as to what unites all these narratives and what they mean. So, we shall start opening line. It's lest anyone should suppose that I am a cuckoo's child, got on the wrong side of the blanket by lusty peasant stock and sold into indenture in a short fallen season. I may say that I am houseborn and reared in the night court proper for all the good it did me. Phedre no Delaunay. Doesn't have that name yet, doesn't matter. Book of the New Sun has one of the more famous unreliable narrations in Severian, and it starts off with what is now a classic line. It is possible I already had some presentiment of my future. The locked and rusted gate that stood before us, with wisps of river fog threading its spikes like the mountain paths, remains in my mind now as a symbol of my exile. That is why I have begun this account of it with the aftermath of our swim, in which I, the torturer's apprentice Severian, had so nearly drowned. Kharkanas also follows a similar line of thought, in which it declares its unreliable narration upfront, though I suppose Severian isn't as upfront about it, but at the very least he's honest that, I am telling you a story, as is Phedre, and as is Gallan here, in which he says, so you have found me and would know the tale. When a poet speaks of truth to another poet, what hope has truth? Let me ask this then. Does one find memory in invention, or will you find invention in memory? Which bows in servitude before the other? Will the measure of greatness be weighed solely in the details? Perhaps so, if details make up the full weft of the world, if themes are nothing more than the composite of lists perfectly ordered and unerringly rendered, and if I should kneel before invention as if it were memory made perfect. Do I look like a man who would kneel? Now, what those three opening lines have in common is that all three of them practically declare that this is an unreliable narrative. Phedre, Severian, and Gallan are all telling you a story. Phedre is much more, and Severian, I suppose, are more upfront with the fact that they're telling you a story, but it's their story. Gallan purposefully removes himself from the story to tell it. Both Book of the New Sun and the Kushiel trilogy, the Phedre trilogy, and I suppose the Middle trilogy as well, are first person. Kharkanas isn't, and neither is this. So, in order to further understand what that means, and how unreliable narration can pertain to both first-person narratives, as shown there, and third-person narratives, let's talk about a few more examples. So, often you have different sorts of unreliable narrators. I would say that Phedre is hard to pin down. What makes her unreliable is essentially how her viewpoint and her cultural upbringing is what defines how she views things. Who she is, what she is, where she came from is what informed her decisions, and that is displayed in the narrative because he's the only voice we have. Severian, well, Severian's weird. you're gonna have to go someone else to hear what gives it Severian specifically, but yeah, he's an odd case. And the way this starts off, already the first line, I had some presentiment of my future, already pertains that he's not telling you the full story. Gallan, on the other hand, is very upfront with the fact he's going to lie to you. He says, I'm going to do many things I don't remember. He says that he's going to discard the details in many cases. And he even outright declares that if a poet speaks of truth to another poet, then what hope has truth? So, in that sense, you know Gallan's unreliable from the get-go. Now, that brings us to the Crippled God. And the Crippled God, in chapter 24, in page 1147 of 1200 something, no, not even that, 1190, we get the following line. I will remember this. I will set out scrolls and burn upon them the names of these fallen. I will make of this work a holy tome, and no other shall be needed. Hear them. They are humanity unfurled, laid out for all to see, if one would dare look. There shall be a book, and it shall be written by my hand. Wheel and seek the faces of 1,000 gods. No other can do what I do. Not one can give voice to this holy creation. But this is not bravado. For this, my Book of the Fallen, the only god worthy of telling it, is the crippled one, the broken one. It has not always been thus. I never hid my hurts. I never disguised my dreams, and I never lost my way. And only the fallen can rise again. Which, in book 10 of a 10-book series, about 3 million and a bit words in, we finally get confirmation, explicit confirmation, and then post, metatextual information and confirmation that Kaminsod is indeed the author of the Book of the Fallen, with all that pretends. So what's the difference? To be somewhat fair to Kaminsod, he does, well, I guess he doesn't. Steve starts the book by saying, now we open the old book, and how the book retains the tales of these fallen and all of that. So somehow you are informed, at least obliquely, that the book, the Malazan Book of the Fallen, is a book in the universe. But that doesn't tell you much about the author, and it's not written diegetically. It's not within the book. Like those pages, that poem, now these ashes have grown cold, we open the old book, and the ending poem of this book, remember us, are not diegetic. They're outside of the world. They're the author, the real life author, Stephen Erickson, telling you that we do these things. Kaminsod is not telling you these things. So, in that sense, Kaminsod hides his identity. He hides the fact that he's the narrator for the better part of the series. Which is weird. In most other unreliable narratives, you have this idea that some guy's being the narrator. Like someone is. They're not necessarily omniscient, especially if it's a first-person narrative like Kushiel or the Book of the New Sun. And Gallan at least acknowledges that, yeah, I am omniscient because this is my creation, but I'm not going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to tell you exactly what happened. This is not history, this is a play, this is fantasy. This is a bardic tale. Kaminsod does not acknowledge this. Ever. Frankly, the only reason we have to cast doubt upon him is because of another book in the series, which is Told the Hounds. Because in Told the Hounds, you have Krupp, who is also narrating. And Krupp is much more upfront with the fact that he is unreliable, because he is one man. He is not a deity, as far as we know, presumably. He is diegetically present in Darujhistan, and so he would reasonably have no knowledge of events that would occur in other places, like Black Coral, more so in, say, Itkovian Sparrow, where both parties that are participating are dead. So he's just writing a scene between a dead god and his dead guardian. There's absolutely no way he could have diegetically had that information, so he's making it up to tell a story. So in that sense, Krupp is acknowledging his unreliableness by saying, you know what, this is a tale. This is because you're all in grief, because shit has happened, because bad things have happened. And we need an uplifting tale. We need to go through all the motions of grief. In that sense, All the Hounds is, what Steve has called a cipher for the series. I'm not going to touch upon that because AB has done so already, and AB's a lot better than this than me. So, what I'm going to touch instead on is what I want to call why is Kaminsod. Not who is Kaminsod or how is Kaminsod, which we probably should be asking. Poor guy. But why? Before we do that, a bit counterproductively, we're actually going to ask the question, who is Kaminsod? And why is Kaminsod mostly pertains to the third aspect of why. Or rather, the inverse. Why pertains to the third aspect of how or who. So, before I lose my train of thought, let's get into it. So, who is Kaminsod? Stage 1. Kaminsod is the Book of the Fallen's main antagonist, for the most part. He is the crippled god. Okay? Kaminsod is the bad guy. The baddie we've been fighting off for 6 books. Memories of Life, Twisted Dreams. Kaminsod is the guy your girlfriend tells you not to worry about. Kaminsod is the mastermind behind the Panindomin, behind the Outbound that guide Karsa, behind Rulad, behind Polio's plague, all of that, right? Kaminsod's behind that. In that sense, Kaminsod is not a very great guy. He's a pretty bad person. He's not someone you should root for or care for. And yeah, as the book goes on, he changes, which we are going to tackle how in a later episode, possibly with Mora. And he becomes, what I narrated earlier, this author, which is stage 2. Stage 2 of who is Kaminsod? Kaminsod is the author of the Book of the Fallen. Wait, what does that mean? As pertained to earlier, Kaminsod is diegetically the author of the Book of the Fallen within the Book of the Fallen's universe. Which means, for our purposes, that Kaminsod needs to have some way to get the information that pertains to the Book of the Fallen within the world. To do that, he needs to either ask around, he needs to have some measure of godly power, which he would not otherwise have, and he needs to have some way to write it down, which, he says he's going to burn scrolls and burn upon those scrolls the name of the Fallen. Sure, cool, that's great. How does he ask, and who does he ask, is not tackled diegetically, but we can reasonably infer that we have at least 2, maybe 3 good candidates. One of them is Krupp, because All the Hounds exists, and for All the Hounds to exist in the manner that it does, we can reasonably infer that Krupp basically told Kaminsod what happened with him. I'm the guy that does the hammer. You wouldn't know me, yeah. The other one, reasonably, is probably Fisher, because Fisher has this penchant for seeking out tales, writing them down, and overall just transferring them to the wider audience. And in so doing, reasonably, Kaminsod would have found them and asked him, what happened. The third one, which is a bit more of a debatable one, is arguably Phedre. Though, again, there's little diegetic evidence to support that this might even be the case, and there is a theory that, Phedre couldn't have done so for his own reasons. And then you have other, secondary or tertiary characters that could have been cloned, like Sadek, who collected Badal's poems. You have, T-Hole or something. So, in universe, Kaminsod cannot be an omniscient author, because he is within the world of the Book of the Fallen for only a finite amount of time, we'll say 120,000 years and a bit. Some of the events described within the Book of the Fallen happened way before Kaminsod ever arrived. So, diegetically, Kaminsod cannot be omniscient. He is not an omniscient narrator within the universe. That is not something up for debate. That's where unreliability comes in, because he doesn't acknowledge that. He doesn't tell you, yeah, I couldn't have known this, so I just went for the next better source. There's some few oblique acknowledgements of this that I pertained to last episode in Toll the Hounds, with, I think it's the last Dark and Light, detailing how, like, Anomander and the Zerg fought or something, like, it's given to Baruch and he's, like, laughing, like, what the fuck is this? What is this? But other than that, Kaminsod does not acknowledge in any way that he couldn't have known these things, because he wasn't there in Kharkanas. He wasn't there when Kharkanas happened. Reasonably, Gallan was. And even he is not telling you the truth. So, Kaminsod's source are secondary, tertiary sources, which he does not bother to tell you about. He just says, this is what happened. Trust me, bro. Gallan, on the other hand, very much acknowledges, like, yeah, I'm the primary source. I'm making things up. Deal with it. This is my work. This is my creation. This is my memory. I'm the boss here. You answer to me. And in that sense, Gallan is unreliable, for sure. But at least he acknowledges it. And that makes a big difference in how you approach the narrative. Knowing, and rather, the character that's doing the narration being aware of their own unreliability is a very important difference. Because in so doing, they won't posit themselves as all-knowing individuals, like I think Severian tends to do at some points. Phedre at some point is the same as well, because she underplays her current emotions because of what's coming up later. Kaminsod doesn't do that. Kaminsod doesn't tell you, so this is what happened here, but don't worry, it's going to get way worse later. No, it's not like that. It's not like that at all. He is a pseudo-omniscient narrator in that sense, when he can't be. And reasonably, diegetically, he would know that he can't be. Which brings us to stage 3 of who and why is Kaminsod. And I'm going to say that's something that, hold on to your seats. Kaminsod needn't exist. Because Kaminsod on stage 3 is not a character. What Kaminsod represents, abstractly, can be viewed as a manner through which to view the text. In the same, Gallan is very, very similar. But Kaminsod need not exist beyond his capacity as, he is the bad guy that we fight against. Kaminsod effectively acts as a lens through which to view the series. The fact that he acknowledges his own unreliability at the very end recontextualizes everything up until that point. He tells you, yeah, so I lied. I don't know everything. I can't know everything. I have an agenda. I'm biased. It's on you to figure out where and why. And obviously, Kaminsod isn't directly telling you this. It's Steve, right? Severian is telling you this. So, in that sense, what Kaminsod represents is not the crippled god, not the author of the Book of the Fallen, but he represents a way that Steve wants you to view the Book of the Fallen. So why is Kaminsod? Kaminsod exists diegetically to be the antagonist for the greater part of the book. Kaminsod exists extra-diegetically to usher the reader onto critical thinking, because Steve wants you to approach this work through a critical lens. And I think he understands this and says, yeah, but what if I do it better next time? And that's when he introduces Gallan, and he tells you, yeah, I'm going to make shit up. I am going to lie to you. I am going to bullshit you. It's on you to to figure out what I want, why I'm telling the story like this, and what to take away from it. And in that sense, Kaminsod is sort of a beta test for Gallan, right? Gallan is like the full release. Kaminsod's the beta version. And what's interesting is I don't think any other narrator can be substituted like that. You can't have Severian substituted as just like some guy. You can't have Phedre just substituted as some gal. They're not some person. They are the chief driver of the narrative. Kaminsod and Gallan are not. And that's what makes these two different, because there is an ongoing debate if third-person unreliable narratives can even exist. And yeah, they're right here. So in that sense, Kaminsod Stage 3 is he doesn't even exist. He is not a character. He is a way in which you are called upon to read the text, or reread the text more reasonably, and to approach it with a critical eye and piece together for yourself what the book is trying to tell you. Beyond the cool battles, beyond the scenery, the atmosphere, dig into the dialogue, dig into each scene and say, what am I being shown here? That is why Kaminsod exists. It also helps that he's named like Kaminsod, Kam and Sod. So there is that, I suppose. But yeah, I think that's all for now. I don't have anything more to add. Ideally, eventually, at some point, we're going to do an episode on like who Kaminsod is properly in the Book of the Fallen, beyond what I said here. And we're going to analyze his paradigm shift. We're going to analyze all the things he does diegetically, and why he changes from, he's going to give you a left dice to the testicles if you do him wrong, to an overall fairly forgiving and decent person. And we're also probably going to talk about how you should treat him diegetically, because all of this, stage 3, we called it, is extra diegetic. Diegetically, it's stages 1 and 2, and those are the ones we're going to be talking about next time, which is why I didn't want to get too deep into them here. Yeah, so goodbye.